How much did we make? The profit, the streams, the loss. How much did we pay everybody? The cameraman, the staff. Maybe we bought some funny hats. Welcome back to Wine and Chill, your home for all things legal shenanigans. I'm Stephanie, your friendly neighborhood lawyer. Well, if you're new here, not your lawyer, which brings me quickly to our disclaimer. By watching this video, you understand and acknowledge that this video is solely for entertainment purposes only, and you agree that you've read the full disclaimer down below in the description box. So, in our continuation of supporting Black-owned wines, we have Kamusha, which is a South African wine by a Zimbabwean winemaker, which is very cool, by Tinashe Nyamudoka, which I practice it, so hopefully I'm saying that right. Oh, it's refreshing, light. I like it. So today we are going to continue. This will be the last part. Because now, unless someone leaks the contract, we pretty much have the majority of the information. So continuing from last week's live where we talked about the Joe Budden podcast, his alleged contractual issues and his firing of Rory and Mal. I got it right today. So our agenda, debunking falsehoods from Joe, because child, there were a lot of them. We're going to talk about the partnership agreement. We finally know what type of agreement we're talking about. We finally know what type of agreement they may have entered into. And again, it's may have because no one has pulled a Kanye and tweeted out said agreement. We are going to talk about contracts are your friend, because if you learn anything from this channel, I hope that that is what you learn. Then, since there are no lawsuit opening one-liners yet, and y'all know I love lawsuit opening one-liners, we're going to talk about some spicy quotes. And lastly, and most importantly, in my opinion now, we are going to talk about Olivia Dope's allegations. Let's start with debunking falsehoods that Joe Budden himself previously stated, in which I repeated with a grain of salt and told you that this is a restatement. So the first one being, which I love that Rory just started with the receipts. He was like, I would like to know that he used his email to sign up for SoundCloud for the original format of the Joe Budden podcast. Which is interesting because when Joe stated that Rory popped up on him, he stated numerous, he said episode 6, 7, 17, he just started stating numbers. There were a few in the comments being like, that's not true. Rory was there from the beginning. My only advice, since I'm not giving legal advice, is maybe you should check your toxic king, because clearly he has a way with letting the truth get away from him. Next thing, there was a lot of chit chat around oh, Joe is upset with Rory because Rory's trying to fight him, to which Rory, his comment was, I'm not trying to fight anybody, we're just joking. Which I believe, who's fighting at work? Why? Anyways, so let's go through the deals. We're going to go through the major deals that they signed, maybe didn't sign, and then we're going to go down the breakdown of the contract and the issue around, why they didn't have a contract for a hot second. So the first being is they had a title offer that Rory apparently had started the conversation. Joe was upset with him about it. Joe then had the conversation. They turned on the title deal. Okay, fine. We're only doing this for a timeline of events. During the title conversations, as we'll call them, Rory, Mal, and Joe had no contract between the three of them at this point. Rory had asked for one, to which, according to Rory, Joe flipped out at him. That is a sign of we're gonna get into that. We're gonna go through the list really quick. So they have the Cash App agreement, then there's the Spotify agreement. Rory did mention maybe percentage of audio, 2%, but then he didn't fully backtrack, but then he said, oh, the percentage, whatever. So I'm not sure if it was 2%. That would be interesting. Could do the math. Y'all know I don't do math. If that was the actual percentage, and figure out how much money they were making. And then last deal that we're just going to mention briefly, Patreon, which I talked about, to which Rory confirmed, in which I told y'all, anybody, you can sign up for a Patreon. Anybody can literally sign up for a Patreon. It's free to do so, and they take a percentage like we talked about last week. Joe has a separate deal, Joe himself, where he is the head of a department. They've given him that title, which I think is interesting. There are also a few celebrities that are head of corporate departments, which my only feedback there is you cannot be head of a department if you don't manage anyone. That's all. So after the title fiasco, which they didn't take the deal and they had their little blow up and their argument, Rory pointed out something which I think is very important to repeat. And again, you should watch it's only an hour long, Rory and Mal's video that they did. It's $2, give them some coins. It's good. To which he said that Joe got extremely upset with him. He called him insecure for wanting a contract. Listen, as a person with, a decent acumen of sense, if someone calls you insecure for wanting to have a contract, you should run away from them. Would you go to a dealership and say, hey, I'm gonna give you this money for this car and not sign any paperwork? No, because the dealership would call the police on you and be like, they stole this, they're stealing, never seen him, never heard of him, who is this? What would you have a business relationship with someone who doesn't want to sign a contract with you? The only reason why they're doing that is because they're trying to do shady foolishness. It's giving scammer, it's giving manipulator. So let's talk about their partnership agreement. So last live, we were trying to figure out, okay, a few things. One, are they contract, 1099, or are they employees, W-2? Or are they something else? What is it? Because the way Joe had presented it, it was giving 1099. It was giving contract worker to me. I was like, okay, I think they're like a 1099, which is you are work for hire. That's the vibe I was getting, which is not a salaried employee. But technically, if you're a contract worker, you do work for someone. You're project-based, etc. So that's what it was given. According to Rory and Mal, I'm gonna get this right. According to Rory and Mal, that is not the case. So they have what they called a profit sharing agreement. They have a partnership agreement is generally what it's called. 80% sure that's probably what their agreement looks like. They have a partnership agreement to which they have assigned all IP rights to Joe. So Joe does own IP, all the intellectual property. So the copyright, the trademarks, the rights to reproduce, create derivative works, the right to distribute. Joe owns all those rights. They have stated this. Okay, that is definitely listed in their contract. IP rights are a huge point of contention. It seems here there was no contention around IP rights. There is one contention and one contention alone, and that is about accounting, which if you were to have sat there and drank every time they said accounting, you would have been very, very in a happy place. A few things we can accept. Joe is on the IP rights. Both of them have said this. Okay, cool. There is a term limit to this partnership agreement. They both mentioned briefly like, oh, we see Joe, he's moving funny. He's trying to bring other people in because he's, I think he really wanted to wait till our contract ended. So there is a term limit. I don't know when the term limit is. Again, they haven't released it. The way that partnership and profit sharing agreements generally work is twofold. The first being, usually in a partnership, you have to buy into the partnership. Usually in a partnership, you say like, okay, hey, we're going to enter into this partnership. I am going to give you like, child, let's say we're broke, because let's be realistic, y'all not paying these student loans. We need $100 to get this up and running. I'm gonna give you $50 for my 50%. You're gonna put in $50 for your 50%. Boom. Both Mal and Rory both acknowledge, hey, we didn't pay into this partnership. This is sweat equity. Sweat equity means time served, time given. The way this works is they are calling it profit sharing. It's a partnership agreement. In their partnership agreement, they are all sharing the expenses. So when Joe took a dig at them and was like, you pay for the recording, you pay for this, you pay for that. What I'm understanding, boo-boo, they're paying for expenses too. So they pay for the expenses. So say it costs for a month. We're just gonna make up numbers because neither of us know. Say it costs for a month $100,000 to put on this podcast however many times a week. You have to pay the sound people, the cameraman. You have to pay oh, this podcast kind of takes long. Let's make sure everybody has breakfast. You have to pay for all these things. Say it costs $100,000. Okay, say on the back end on streaming, they make $1 million. Okay, 1 million minus 100,000, 900,000. So out of that 900,000, Roy and Mal will then get their percentage off of 900,000. That's how profit sharing works. So in order for you to know how much money you're owed on the back end, after the streaming, after the expenses, you would need to see the accounting. That is common sense, which is why, according to Rory and Mal, it's written into their contract as a clause, which I 100% believe them, because how else? Profit sharing agreements and partnership agreements do not work unless they are explicitly written out. You have to explicitly state, okay, this is the percentage I'm getting, which means I have the right to see your books. Do I have the right to see your books for your entire estate? No, just the part that, we are partnering on. So for example, if Joe Budden entered into, which he did, a Cash App agreement for sponsorship, that was a sponsorship agreement, hold on, Cash App, Patreon, and they have YouTube at this point, and Spotify. So let's take Patreon, for example. Patreon, it's easy to do the math on Patreon. The reason why we can't do the math on Joe's is he doesn't have how many patrons he has. a lot of patrons, which shout out to Kim from For Harriet for her shout out, like, woo! I can't tell you how much that means to me. It really means a lot to me that you even found my little channel. So for Joe, let's do a low end estimate. Low end, 25 grand a month, I would say. Much higher. It's likely much higher. All you do is multiply the patrons, if you want to do the low end, by the lowest tier in the Patreon. That's it. Very simple. So Rory said he got a Patreon check, that they got a Patreon check, which means in their partnership profit sharing agreement, it states, hey, anything having to do with this podcast, you're getting a percentage. That would lead me to believe that, which means their lawyer did their job and was like, okay, so if they use your likeness, your voice, or anything, then you're owed a percentage, which is why Joe was paying them. It's not the kindness of his heart for him to be like, oh, it's really mine and I'm helping you. No, the podcast is 3 people. It just happens to be in your name. So one thing to point out, they both mentioned, which I think there might be confusion on their end a little bit, and that's their attorney's fault for not explaining this to them better. There's likely an accounting clause because they seem to, but all 3 of them seem to, 2 of them actually, Rory and Mal, both were like, well, it's in our accounting clause, so I don't know what to tell you. And Joe seemed to have erased out of his mind that he had to provide them documents per their accounting clause. So there is an accounting clause, assumably, and an audit clause. Those are 2 separate things. Now, the reason why I'm telling you there's confusion, most contracts have audit rights, which audit rights just means usually, like when I negotiate them, I only let people do them once a year and with prior notice because it can become annoying. And you have to limit the scope. Like, you're going to audit me and look at what? Like, okay, yes, you want audit to make sure that I'm not in breach of the contract. That usually in tech, it comes up in terms of data security and privacy. So the clients want to make sure that, hey, as my tech vendor, you're a part of my tech stack. I have to make sure that you're actually compliant. Yeah, that's normal, which you'll do once a year. They'll come in. Usually you can do it online, but like maybe they'll come in. It depends on like what type of tech company you are, if you actually have any warehousing to see and be like, okay, yep, all this is compliant. We see you're doing this, etc. Okay, auditing is separate. You don't have to go to court to audit somebody. I think if I remember back correctly, when we reviewed one of Kanye's agreements, he had audit rights in his agreement. Child, that was like 8 months ago. I don't remember which agreement it was, but if you watch that video, it's something we talk about. Audit rights are normal because you need the ability to just make sure, like, hey, I know you're busy. I know like other things are going on. I just want to make sure that we're square. Okay, the accounting clause, presumably from this, seems separate. According to Rory and Mal, Joe was to provide accounting 4 times a year, quarterly. Joe did not do that. Apparently, Joe didn't even do it twice a year. Apparently, what he was providing instead of a full accounting was an email with a spreadsheet. Part of a proper accounting is a profit and loss statement. How are you supposed to know if you're getting paid streams minus expenses times the percentage what they're getting paid? How should you know this if you don't see a profit and loss statement? How much did we make? The profit is the streams. The loss, how much did we pay everybody? The cameraman, the staff, the people that delivered the food. Maybe we bought some funny hats. Like, how much did all of that cost? And how much is my percentage? How would one know that without proper accounting? So on that point, it's very clear to me that for many, many years, Joe has been in breach of this agreement, most likely. If what Rory and Mal is saying is the truth, which after listening to both of them, I was always inclined, I'm gonna be honest, I'm much more inclined to believe them. His story didn't really make a lot of sense, Joe's. He's in breach, but to Rory and Mal's detriment, instead of being like, hey friend, hey boo, hey partner, you're in breach, they just decide to stop asking him, which that's not a good idea for many reasons. If somebody is screwing you, you're just gonna let them continue to screw you? No, you shouldn't. We'll get into that at the end. Now with accounting. When this came up, my jaw kind of dropped. Rory stated that his accountant, so he was just forwarding over the Excel spreadsheet to which his accountant was doing forensic accounting, is when you go through everything. So doing his forensic accounting and was like, there's an issue here, a $400,000 issue. To which Rory nicely called it a mistake. And quote, we're going to get to the quotes at the end, and quote, I'm not accusing anybody of stealing. I'm not calling anyone a thief. Listen, if it was me, teeth would be the nicest thing coming out of my mouth. All right, because there are no spicy opening lawsuit lines yet. Mal said that he would never sue Joe. Rory didn't say anything. That's all I'm gonna say. Let's take a moment and read some spicy quotes from their response. All right, I'm not even sure who this Negro is anymore because he's saying things. He's moving a certain way. He's wearing funny hats. So first of all, before he went on to say he was literally wearing hats that he thought were funny to him, I thought it was a play on words, which was funny to me. Apparently the brand of hat Mal didn't like. I don't know, that was above me. I'm gonna be honest. Y'all know I'm not that hip. All right, Joe, you don't have the line around the corner. We have the line around the corner because you've done shows here before and you've never had the line around the corner. Now, I don't know Mal's personality because I didn't watch the podcast to know if he would be so bold as to say this to his face, but if he did, 3 claps for that man. This was my favorite. Stop with these narratives to dumb people that think you're smart. He said, y'all are giving a Sidney Powell followers vibe. You're not gonna defamate my character. Now, before you point your finger and say, Stephanie is giving classes and egregious, I have no room to laugh because I didn't even pronounce the man's name properly. So I will hold my laughter in as to not give classes and egregious. But no, you are not gonna defame his character, sir. All right, so the only question I have remaining from watching their response video to listening to Joe's video, and because we don't have the contract, is no one in the response brought up Joe's allegation that there's a non-compete clause, which I thought was very interesting. So is there a non-compete clause? Also, would this audio-visual production that we have now watched and paid $2 for count as a podcast in terms of said non-compete clause, if it exists? Because we have now seen that Mr. Budden may not necessarily be telling the truth in certain things, which a lot of us knew that. But had to let y'all come to this conclusion on your own. So that I'm very curious about. Let me know in the comments, do you think if there's a non-compete clause that this podcast would count under the terms of a non-compete? I don't think it would, which is, I would, if I was their attorney, which it seems like their attorney is thorough, I would classify it as a one-time response, whereas a podcast implies a series, multiple, which they did a very good job at saying like, hey, we weren't gonna do this, we're just coming here to clear the air, which I thought was very smart on their end, and which I'm sure their PR person and attorney advised them about that. So again, to wrap up this segment, for the 11th time, please sign a contract, but more importantly than that, get a good attorney who, some attorneys can be good, but they don't like explaining things to people, who will explain it to you. You have paid for them. Say, hey, I don't understand this. This is your job, literally. I paid you thousands of dollars, presumably. Can you explain this to me? Because either the attorney thinks that you don't want to know, so they're like, oh, I can just do this faster myself, like whatever, or they're lazy, or they're not that good. It's either one of the three, and let's just assume the best in my profession that's full of interesting people. Let's just assume they think that you don't want to know and they're just going to do it for you. No, you want to know. It's your contract. It's your money. Because all this could have been resolved had they simply told the attorney, hey, so-and-so, we haven't received our proper accounting as to what I thought accounting was. I know I'm new to this, but you're true to this. What is accounting? What is it supposed to look like? Where's the profit and loss sheet I think I'm supposed to get? Can you reach out to Joe's attorney and ask them for it? This could have got nipped in the bud years ago. Because their attorney would then have emailed the other attorney and say, hey, pursuant to Section 5, Clause 8, an accounting is due. These are the elements of the accounting that we all agreed to. Please send this within 7 days. It could have been so easy. It could all be so simple. I won't say. All right, so on to something more insidious, which is these Olivia Dope allegations about harassment. And I'm saying harassment and not was written down below, because the last time we talked about what's written down below and I said it out loud, YouTube demonetized my video, which is not going to work with my aggressive student loan repayment plan. Okay, so she stated earlier this week that she had, during a live podcast, received unwanted, uncomfortable solicitations from Joe in front of people, which he stated that he wanted to sleep with her since the moment he saw her. Which, A, how would that make you feel as someone who's getting a check from this person? Likely uncomfortable. But more importantly, why? And this is a rhetorical why, because I know why, because people need help. Why is the Veritol always directed at the person who is making the accusation? It's live. Like, we can look at it. You can see what's happening. It's clearly uncomfortable. It's clearly inappropriate. Would you allow anybody at work to say that to you? No. So why then get online to go tear down a Black woman? Why? And why do people love to protect their problematic fave who has a propensity, which you cannot use propensity in court, but we're not in court, who has a propensity to do certain things and make people uncomfortable and say wild, reckless things that have actual impact in people's lives? People always love to ask the victim, why now? Instead of asking the perpetrator, why did you do that to begin with? Wouldn't that be a better question? Also, for everyone asking, why now? And by everyone, obviously it's not everybody. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. Most of us have, at some point, if you are Black or brown in this country, you have likely suffered a microaggression at work, which I don't know why it's called a microaggression. Little racism, as they politely call it in corporate now, microaggressions. They've rebranded it so people understand not to do them. Or you could just call it racism, child. I don't know. Have suffered either a microaggression, aka little racism at work, or been just straight up harassed at work, or you know, that word there. Did you in the moment complain or didn't you? Did this happen to your friend? Did they complain? Would you shame your friend for being like, hey, I'm uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to receive all this backlash. Like, I haven't processed this. I don't want to say anything. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't tell your friend, oh, well, I don't even know if I believe you. But why would you go and tell a stranger that? What reason does she have to lie? None. It's recorded. You can see it. It will never cease to amaze me. It will never cease to amaze me. So on that note, and what, you know, we've talked about, like workplaces, particularly toxic workplaces in this country, particularly if you're a corporate Negro. Don't let a toxic workplace con you into thinking you're a toxic person for wanting better. You don't have to be harassed at work. You don't deserve to be harassed at work. You deserve to say something when you feel like saying something. That's it. Okay. And on that note, if you haven't already, slipped up real quick, please go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next video.